the bath, hence the wet hair. But that's when I like doing my videos, unfortunately, because I've got kind of a new zip of energy and I feel all clean and cozy and refreshed. And even though I might look like hell or like a cat dragged me in from a rainstorm, you know, it is what it is. I'm gonna do probably a video or two. I used to be a realtor before we bought our homestead, and I gave up my big house of close to 2,000 square feet in the city to buy a small house that's on a little over 2 acres. I have a dear friend that is going through some experiences trying to buy their second home, but before I get to the video on the processes of what happens and what you need to think about when you're moving from your first home that you own to an upgrade or to another home, I want to first cover for those that have maybe never purchased a home before and they've been renters, whether that's renting a house, renting an apartment, renting a mobile home, but you've been a renter and you're thinking about possibly purchasing your first home. Now, there are different regulations and different law changes from state to state. So I'm just gonna, take what I say with a grain of salt, but in your area and in your state, in your part of the country, and if you're not in the United States of America, it could be completely different if you're in another country. So make sure that you get a hold of a local professional realtor to verify, some of the topics and things that I bring up in these two videos. And, just double check to make sure that, things might be a little bit different than they are in my state in the Midwest. Okay, so first-time home buyers. They have home buying programs, lenders do, banks, credit unions, whatnot, that to get your first home, just in order to get it, to get into a house, you have to have decent credit, and decent credit is usually about, I'd say probably about 675 credit score or above. It is considered pretty decent credit score. You need to have 3.5% down. So whatever the total amount is of the asking price of a house that you're in love with, to get a ballpark of how much you're going to need to put down to get the loan from the bank or your lender or whoever you're going through, you need to figure out 3.5% of the asking price. Now, that doesn't mean that you go look at your property you like and you offer full price. I'm not saying that you do that in every circumstance or situation. You try to bargain and negotiate pleasantly between the seller and yourself, the buyer, and you try to get it, the buyer's agenda is they want to get it for as less money as they possibly can. The seller side of the fence, their agenda is we want to get the most money that we can possibly get for our property, for our real estate property that we're selling. So you guys have to meet somewhere in the middle, and that's basically the game. The buyer wants to get it as cheap as possible. The seller wants to get the most they can get for it. So you got to come together, and you're not going to get everything that you want as the buyer, and the seller doesn't generally get everything they want as the seller. You have to compromise like two adult parties, let me word it that way, because you might have a maid or a significant other, and you have to come to the middle and make concessions in order to work together. And hopefully, if that goes well, then you agree on a price and terms and closing dates, and you do your home inspections. You have the mechanicals inspected. If there is a well or a septic involved, you need to make sure that that's inspected and that it's up to the legal state standards. Here in Iowa, we have really good buyer protection laws. So for a buyer that for a seller that has a property that has a septic, we have to pay to have it inspected by a list of approved inspectors for septics and leach fields. we have to choose from that list and then pay to have it inspected and have a written report drawn up saying, yes, it's up to par, or no, it's not up to par, this is what needs to be done in order for this property to be sold to a buyer. Not all states are like that. Missouri is horrible, and this is my opinion because I was looking at properties in Missouri, and there's like no buyer protection laws in Missouri. It's like buyer beware. The outside shell of the house might look good to the eye, but nothing in the house works. Everything leaks from plumbing, the electricity is messed up, the plumbing's messed up, the septic and the well are too close together under the ground, and they're not going to tell you. And in my state, we have property disclosures, and they're taken seriously. As a seller, you don't lie about the property disclosure, because it could come back and you could be taken to court and sued. But Missouri, there doesn't seem to be any fear to any seller to lie their asses off and not list the truth on the property disclosures. And even if you pay for an inspection and then you give them a copy of the report, and it's just a list a mile long of everything wrong with the place, serious things, the sellers don't seem to even give a crap. There's like, so what? We want the same amount of money. And it's like, no, you're not getting the same amount of money. If nothing in the house works, you're not getting the agreed price, that we had originally agreed upon. If you're not agreeing to fix anything, you don't get the same price. That's not how it works. So beware if you live in the state of Missouri. That has got to be just a terrifying state to buy property, real estate in. So back to where I live. Okay, so first-time home buyer, you're going to want to get the home inspected, the mechanicals inspected. If there's a well or septic, you're going to want to make sure that's inspected. Make sure you use a buyer's real estate agent. Never under any circumstances, no matter how bad you're in love with a property and how excited you are and how you don't want to lose it no matter what, never under any circumstances use the listing agent and just go through the listing agent. That's called dual agency. Dual agency in the real estate world means the realtor that is working with the seller and listed their property for sale, and now here you are the buyer, you come along and you go through the same realtor that's listing the property for the seller to try to wheel and deal and bargain and all this. Don't do it. Dual agency, a realtor is not legally supposed to advise either the buyer or the seller in that type of a situation. We're supposed to stay neutral. When we stay neutral, that means we can't give advice to the buyer. We're not supposed to give advice to the seller. Now, just because there's regulations and rules, that doesn't mean that all people follow them. Get what I'm saying? Just like there's crooked attorneys and realtors. There's crooked attorneys and there's honest attorneys. Doesn't mean that just because, there's laws and regulations for conduct that they follow those rules of conduct. There's a lot of shady people out there in the real estate world as well as the legal community. So, never under any circumstances use the same real estate agent that is listing the property that you want to buy, because their sole devotion, and they're not going to tell you this because it's illegal, it's against the rules of conduct, but their devotion lies with the seller. The seller has more opportunity for the real estate agent to make them money, if not right now, in the future. When they sell their house that they're currently living in, if it isn't the property that they own that they're selling, right, that you want, they might not be living there. That might have been a rental, or they might have inherited it, or something. So, and they live in a different property. Okay? That real estate agent is already thinking into the future about making money off these sellers if he or she makes that seller super happy and pleased. So here you come along and you're just a one-time, if you use them as well, you're just a one-time customer They hope that in the far, 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 far future, when you're ready to move and upgrade to another house, that you remember them and come back, of course. But they're going to make money in the more nearer future by pleasing the seller and the seller's family members, adult children, grandparents, parents maybe that are aging and need to go to a retirement community. They want to please the seller because that's going to make them, the green stuff, way more money than what you as a one-time client. Do you understand what I'm saying? So always get a buyer's agent that is not with the same real estate brokerage that the selling agent is with. Make sure it's from a totally different company. You get yourself a buyer's agent to protect you and, you know, all things concerning you for your best interest. Normally, buyer's agents are free to the buyer. The buyer's agent gets half of the commission from the sellers. The selling agent and the buyer agent split the commission. So like if the commission is 6%, let's say, in some state, the seller agent gets 3%, the buyer agent gets 3%. Okay? And I know a lot of people, they like to play mind games with themselves and say, well, if I use the listing agent, they're not going to do me wrong because then they're going to get all the commission and not have to split it. So they're not going to screw me over. Yes, they are, because they stand to make far more money and have more clientele coming from the seller, if not the seller themselves, in the near future than they do you waiting for 20 to 30 years for you to want to upgrade from your first home by going through them. Do you get what I'm saying? So always get your own buyer's agent. This is crucial. And don't have that agent from the same brokerage firm as the list agent that's listing the property that you want to buy. Okay? Okay, let's see. What other tips can I talk about? Sometimes when you negotiate with very stubborn sellers that don't want to seem to compromise at all, they want it their way or the highway all the time, sometimes you have to be willing to walk away. And that doesn't mean that there isn't a risk if you do that, because of course there's always a risk in real estate until you close and they hand you the keys to the house. That's when your risk is over. Okay? There's never a sure deal until the closing and they hand you the keys after you've signed the huge stack of paperwork at closing. But sometimes it pays to walk away for a week or two and then go back if it's not pending sale and see if they're willing to then negotiate, because that is the only way that very stubborn, uncooperative sellers will sometimes be a little bit flexible when negotiating. You don't get narky or snarky. I mean, be pleasant, be professional, say, look, we don't feel that this is fair. We're compromising. We don't feel the sellers are compromising. And if the sellers come back as, well, we don't have to compromise, it's our property. Say in a negotiation, no matter if it's on real estate or anything else in life, neither party gets 100% one way, the way that they want it on each side. Both parties have to come together and act like adults and be civilized and be compassionate to a point, and they have to both be flexible to meet in the middle to come to a fair compromise to both parties, not just to one party. Therefore, we're walking. If we can't come, to a fair arrangement for both sides, then we're walking. And then you really have to carry out, that threat or that statement. There's chances that you could lose the property if somebody else swoops in within that week or two and offers them the same amount of money that you did, or offers them full price, or wants to play their little mind games of them not compromising at all. and they're willing to bend backwards, sideways, do the splits, and do a back somersault just to make the sellers happy. There's always a risk in real estate. It's never a sure deal until you've signed the papers and they hand you the key. That's when it's yours. Okay? What else? When you're coming from a rental situation to your first time home buying experience, it's a lot easier because let's say you're on a yearly lease. So you start looking for properties 4 months before your lease is up. Okay, you've got 4 months and then your lease is up for the year. You don't want to start looking too early when you've got a lot of months left on your lease, because you don't want to be penalized and have to continue to pay for the rest of the months that you no longer live there. It only takes about 30 days to close generally on real estate property. So figure about 30 days, okay? And that's when you'll be signing the big stack of paperwork, and then they'll be handing you your key to your new home. So don't start looking if you just signed your new yearly lease because you're not quite ready yet. You haven't found a property. You haven't gotten a lender to pre-approve you. You haven't got all your ducks in a row. Don't start looking for properties right away. Wait until you're down to about 4 months prior to your lease being up. Then start looking, you know. Get a feel for what's out on the market in the area for which you need to be in or that you would like to be in. When you find a place and the negotiating of your offer, remember, get a buyer's agent to represent your best interests. When you've come to an agreed term on purchasing a home, and then it's the realtor's job to do all the legal paperwork and whatnot and to move things forward with the lender, that is when you have the agreed upon and everyone has signed on both sides all their documents with each realtor, side of the realtor, the buyer and the seller realtor. That is when you're going to start giving your written notice then to your landlord that your intentions are to not renew the lease when it comes due in 4 months, as long as everything, and put this in writing, as long as everything continues, you know, to go smoothly to closing, you will be moving out, and then you give them a date. Now, if you're looking 4 months before your lease is up and you find a place right away that you're in love with, you're going to want to ask in your offer that closing not be in 30 days, that closing be in 90 days, because you are on a lease and you have 4 months left. You might have to go ahead and pay for 1-2 months that you're not living in your apartment or your rental place anymore because you're going to already be in your new home. But you got to kind of do what you got to do sometimes. Not every situation is just going to be smooth sailing, peachy cream, top of the line the way you want it. Sometimes, you know, you've got to have money set aside and you've got to account for the fact, if I find a home right away and I have 4 months left on my lease, you know, they might not agree to a 90-day closing. They might say the most that we're going to wait is 60 days. So then you're still going to have 2 months that you're going to have to pay for the rental property, even though you're not going to live there. So you want to have all these scenarios thought about and planned for, and have money, finances set aside for those such scenarios in case that happens to be your situation. Okay, I think I'm going to end it for this first video on first-time home buyers, and then I'm going to go ahead and do another video which is going to cover if you already own a home and you're wanting to sell it, and what's the process and how do you do that to move to another home, and how do you not end up homeless in the middle of this process. So I'm going to cut away for now and wish you blessings. And I'll go ahead and do part 2 for those of us that are in a home already that are wanting to move to another home that we can own.